Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well. Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV.
3:02.
The meeting.
So I think it's time to begin our meeting. So let's call to order the May 18th meeting of the River Advisory Committee. And then for the benefit of our recording secretary, let's do a roll call so that she can know who's here. So I am Richard Huber, the chairman.
Rod Borden.
Warren Biggins.
Lionel Ingram. Nico Costadis.
Dan Jones.
Terry Harmon.
Thank you, and that is a quorum, so we can go ahead. Okay, the first order of business is to review the minutes of March 16th. Any comments on the minutes?
No.
Okay.
Fine.
Hi. You're going to need to pull up a chair there in the end. That's good. So we have one more person, and this is Trevor Matera, who has just arrived. So we now have 8 people. Okay, so we're doing the minutes of March 16th, and I have a comment. There were 2 handouts at that meeting. One was a schedule, and the other was a list of tasks. And I would like those 2 documents to be included with the minutes because they're referenced in the minutes. You know, there's a mention of task 7. If you didn't have that sheet, you wouldn't know what that was talking about. So I'd like to know if there's any way to attach those 2 documents to the minutes when the minutes become approved. And I don't know, I guess that would be my proposal.
Just give them the secretary,
Yeah.
and we approve they being attached. And I'm sure that.
So I gave them to, I'll follow up, I gave them to the town manager's office and asked that they be attached.
Oh,
But
okay.
I'll make sure that she has them, I'll make sure that they get attached, so I can take that task.
Okay, with that comment, I don't have any other improvements for the minutes. Does anybody have any comments about the draft minutes?
No.
Okay,
fine.
I will entertain a motion
There we
to
go.
approve them.
Second.
Lionel has moved and Terry has seconded. And we'll put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstaining? It's unanimous. We're approving the minutes. Okay, the next thing I need to do is turn it over to Paul to introduce who's going to speak next.
Hello, Paul Velocity, the interim town public works director, excuse me. I've got one thing to talk about today, and that's just to give you folks an update on the feasibility study from VHB. And we got several people here in the audience that I'd like to introduce. We will start out with Jake San Antonio. You've seen him through the Great Dam Removal Project. Stephanie Hudak and I guess she's the next Jake in line.
You got it.
Yeah. And we got Jim Weber from the New Hampshire DES Dam Bureau. We also saw him on the Great Dam Removal Project, plus the breach analysis for the Pickpocket Dam. And then we got Kevin Lucy from New Hampshire DES, and he's also the administrator of the Coastal Resilience Grant, too. That's part of this right here. And who is not here tonight, and she's going on vacation, or this afternoon, is Deb Lazelle. She used to be part of the subgroup for the Great Dam Project. And she is also helping to administer the clean water or stormwater planning grant, of which is $100,000 also. So with that, we've got a presentation for you. Seems to be working up there very nicely. And I'll let Jay come up and will walk us through.
Do you suppose you could provide the spelling of all those names to our recording secretary, just in case that's an issue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And one other thing I wanted to ask, I'm understanding there's going to be a special town meeting to secure funding for the siphons. Do we know anything about that yet, or is it still in progress?
I think the guy sitting right next to you knows a heck of a lot about
Go ahead,
that.
Lionel. So the select board voted unanimously Monday night to authorize town council to petition the Superior Court for permission to hold a special town meeting to secure additional funding for the siphon project. And should that be granted, tentatively, the public hearing to review the warrant article would be June 26th. The first part of town meeting, which would be similar to like our deliberative session in February, would be held July 11th. And the resulting second part of the special town meeting would happen on August 15th, and that would be similar to our election, where folks will come and cast their ballots. So, of course, those dates are all tentative pending approval by Superior Court, but that's the update.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Okay. Jake?
Yeah.
I covered up your stuff here. Thank you.
All right. Paul already introduced me, but I'm Jake San Antonio with VHB, Senior Water Resource Engineer. You already covered my first slide as well. I was on project funding, so I just wanted to acknowledge New Hampshire DES for their help in funding this project. Here's an agenda of what I'm planning to talk through. Give an overall background, go over the study area, the dam, go over some prior studies and prior work that we've done, go through the main components of the feasibility study that is underway, some results of the preliminary investigations, and those have been updated a little bit. We presented those, I want to say April 2 years ago, but they've been updated a bit, and then give an overall status update of the feasibility study, the schedule, and next steps, and then open it up for questions. But I will say we can keep this informal. If there's questions as we go along, interrupt me. So background, this project really started back in 2011 when New Hampshire DES issued a letter of deficiency for the Pickpocket Dam, and that deficiency letter noted some structural deficiencies and other maintenance items, but also required a dam breach analysis be performed. So that was begun in 2016, where we built a hydrologic model of the Exeter River system and evaluated a dam breach scenario under both a sunny day and a 100-year storm event, and then evaluated what the impacts could be downstream. Following that analysis, that analysis identified that with a 100-year dam breach, that there would be a few residential properties potentially impacted and a few mobile home structures. And several bridges. So to finalize that analysis, the town further contracted us to go out and survey and confirm the elevations of the first floor elevations of the residential structures and the mobile home structures, the lowest adjacent ground to those structures, and that survey confirmed that in that 100-year dam breach, that there'd be more than a 1-foot increase in flood elevation and impacts to the first floor of one residential structure and multiple mobile home structures. From that, the Dam Bureau changed the hazard classification of the dam and raised it from a low hazard to a high hazard dam.
Significant to high.
Significant to high? I thought it was low.
Pretty sure it was significant.
Okay, well, significant to high. And then issued a revised letter of deficiency. That letter of deficiency required an emergency action plan and some other components, including studying and submitting an application for how the dam was going to be brought into compliance. Later, many of those items were addressed, including the emergency action plan and some of the maintenance, and a request was made to lengthen the time frame that was in the original determination letter, and they issued a request for action that gave us an extension to 2027 to reconstruct the dam or remove it. Just a little background, I guess, on the location. So Pickpocket Dam is shown by that red star right in the center of the page. We're currently, I know you guys are all from here, but we're currently about here today, and across the street or so is the location of the Great Dam that was removed a few years ago. We're several miles upstream from that. The dam is located right on the town line with the town of Brentwood. And the impoundment from the Pickpocket Dam essentially extends all the way back up to Hague Road in Brentwood, about a 4-mile impoundment. Just some more background on the dam. The dam is a 15-foot high dam. It's about 230 feet in length. The main spillway component is 130 feet in length. It has a few main components, being it has a training weir below the main dam and a fish ladder on river left. And just downstream of the dam is the crossroad. Here's some more photos of the dam. The photo on the top right is on River Right, looking at the main spillway, and you can see the divided flow. On the bottom left is the low-level outlet control structure, which is currently in a deteriorated state. We're seeing a lot of rot in the control mechanism, and it has limited operability currently. The picture in the bottom right is the low-level outlet on the downstream side. Some more photos. Top left is looking from river left, looking downstream. You can see Crossroad in the distance, and you can also see the fish ladder and the lower training weir.
Do ALY fish make it to this fish ladder?
They do make it to this fish ladder.
Interesting.
It doesn't function as well as Fish and Game would like.
Yeah.
When you say river left, you're going downstream.
I am going downstream, yes. So when I say river left, it's like if you're flowing with the river, that's the left side. When I say river right, it's the right side, going with the flow of the river.
Okay.
Continuing the photos, like bottom left, that's within the Exeter River, downstream a crossroad, looking up, and you can see the two dams in the distance. The photo on the bottom right is within the impoundment, looking down at the dam. And then the photo on the top right is, standing on River Right, kind of looking at the dam and the control works.
When were these pictures taken?
These pictures were taken maybe a month ago. So prior studies, I alluded to these already a bit. The Pickpocket dam breach analysis was started in 2016 and updated in 2019. That analysis found that the dam should be a high hazard based on impacts to the first floor of one residential property, and then the structural support to multiple mobile residential structures. It also found that there was overtopping of Route 111, which would determine it a significant hazard dam if it wasn't for the impacts to the residential properties. As part of that dam breach analysis, we did do some additional downstream property surveys to confirm the impacts to the residential properties. We developed an emergency action plan. And when the dam was changed to high hazard, it means it changed the design discharge capacity. So for a high hazard dam, the dam needs to safely pass 250% or 2.5 times the 100-year discharge. So we did some early work to look at what that discharge could be and determined it to be 10,000 CFS or cubic feet per second, the volume or rate of water that the dam needs to safely pass with 1 foot of freeboard. If it was a significant hazard dam, it would have to pass the 100-year flood with 1 foot of freeboard, and the 100-year flood is about 4,000 CFS. We also did some preliminary investigations looking at potential reclassification, looking at crossroad, whether if changes to crossroad would change the backwater impact on the dam and allow the dam to pass more flow. And then we looked at some preliminary options for changing the abutment heights or adding a second abutment stepped back from the main abutments, and then looked at removal of the dam. And I have some slides that go into those in more detail. So now we're getting started on a more detailed feasibility study. And the early work that we've been working on is data collection and survey. Originally when we did the dam breach analysis, we just got survey of the dam proper and got the critical elevations of the outlet structures and the spillway crest and those components. We've now sent out our survey crews and have gotten detailed survey of the dam, property lines, and detailed topography and bathymetry of the immediate impoundment upstream of the dam, and then through that whole 4-mile impoundment, we did survey transects to get understanding of what the bathymetry looks like. The other components that we'll be working on is, determining the alternatives for modifications to the dam and developing conceptual designs. Doing some sediment sampling, so understanding what is in the material in the river, what's in those sediments, whether there's any contamination, what the grain size, mobility could be. Refining the hydrology and hydraulic analysis, and as part of that, we'll also be looking at, or we have started to look at climate change. So, what is the current 100-year storm? What could that be in the future? Looking at cultural resources, starting the Section 106 consultation, starting to look at whether there's any archaeological concerns or impacts to the dam that would require mitigation. And then a detailed impact analysis on a variety of things from fish passage to recreation to water supply. And I'll get into that in more detail as I go along. and then developing a final report summarizing all these analyses and studies to support a decision on how to move forward. So the overall schedule is up here, and I think this is the schedule that Paul shared at the last meeting. So, we're in the May timeframe, so we're currently right here, at the yellow star, giving you a status update. As I said, we've been primarily focused on the data collection. So far, that got to a slower start than we were really hoping, based on the timing of when we got authorization and the high flows that we've had since then. So every time we would schedule the survey crews, the river flows would be too high to safely access the area. We did get a narrow window in April, so we were able to get out and get that work done and collect the sediment samples. We've begun the hydrologic and hydraulic analysis, and we've kicked off the cultural resources work. But the process is really, now that we've got that data collection, is going to gear up and get more into finalizing the alternatives that we're going to evaluate, and then getting into the impact of all those alternatives.
Can you talk about the grant deadlines?
Sure can. So the grant deadlines, as we mentioned earlier, the Coastal Resiliency Grant is paying for a portion of this work, and that deadline is coming up at the end of June. That grant was really front-loading a lot of the data collection pieces. It was funding the bathymetric and topographic surveys. It was funding the development of the sediment sampling plan, sampling collection, and evaluation of the sediment transport post if the dam were to be removed, and funded looking at climate change. So we're well on track to get that early work done in time to meet the grant deadline for the Coastal Resilience Grant. The Stormwater Planning Grant through the SRF funding is paying for another portion of this work, and that deadline ties with the length of this project. And we owe progress updates on the pink stars.
Can you explain the two blue vertical lines? One is the end of June, the other is the end of December. They're both related to Coastal Resilience Grant?
I don't know what, they are. I think they're just denoting. Okay.
Maybe the end of December.
I don't know what the second blue line was, so
So the second blue line is in December of 2023.
Yeah.
We were hoping to get a 6-month extension for the Coastal Resilience Grants, which we won't be able to do. So
ignore that.
That's ignore that second one.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So, yeah, the main blue line and the critical date for getting the early work done is the end of June. And then the rest of the progress, we have, about a year from today to get through this full feasibility study. Yes.
Just going back to the time frame. So will the hydrologic study and analysis be completed by June then?
The hydraulic analysis, the core of it will be done by June. We'll be refining it as we finalize the alternatives and develop those conceptual designs to make sure that they're accurately represented in the model. But it'll be an iterative process with the modeling and refining those alternatives to make sure we're considering the right size spillway and the right height of the abutments, and so it'll get, the core of it will be done by June, July. The grant piece was really only paying for the climate change evaluation, not the full hydraulics.
Okay, thanks.
Question?
Sure. Yeah.
Is the hydraulic study, does that include the potential impact of lowering the water table?
That is not in the hydraulic study, but it is in the impact analysis, yes.
Okay. Because I'm sure, well, I would hope you're aware that we have a unmonitored, or functionally unmonitored dump
Yes.
adjacent to this, which
Yes.
feeds a green spring and a brown spring on my property, so I'm
Okay.
very concerned.
Sure, fair enough. We will be looking at that in detail as part of this. So the preliminary investigation, so this is what I reported on about 2 years ago to this committee, but I wanted to refresh everybody's mind and go through them. So this is what we looked at previously. I have updated them because we have done the hydrology update, and I'll go through that more later. But I'll go through these. So this is, existing conditions with the dam. Just upstream of the dam, there's actually a sediment island that now is all grown in and obstructs a portion of the spillway. So it's located about here in this section. This area in black is where the low-level gate is and the fish ladder. So I blocked that out in the model, but I've shown the gate here just for hydraulic simplicity. The existing crest is at about an elevation of 66, and the portion's obstructed. Under current day conditions, the 100-year storm elevation overtops the abutment elevation. So the current dam didn't meet the requirements for a significant hazard dam, as it would be required to have 1 foot of freeboard to those abutments. The green line is the current day regulatory discharge, so that's that 10,000 CFS that I was talking about previously. And then the red line is evaluating climate change. So evaluating climate change, following the New Hampshire guidance, you add 15% to the precip total. The current 100-year precip is 8.4 inches in 24 hours. So increasing that with climate change, it brings it to 9.7 inches in 24 hours. And that increases the peak flow with that 15% increase by about 50%. It increases it to just under 15,000 CFS. So as I move through the next slides, consistently, the blue line is the 100-year, the green line is the 2.5 times the 100-year, the regulatory discharge, and the red line is the potential future regulatory discharge.
Now, is that looking downstream or upstream?
This is looking as if you're looking downstream.
Looks like upstream.
Yeah, upstream. I'm sorry. Yep, you got me confused. It is looking upstream. So this is, so as part of our preliminary, we were looking at whether crossroad potentially impact the hydraulics of the dam. So we did an evaluation where we took crossroad out of our model just to see if it changed the elevations predicted upstream. And what we found is that removing crossroad had really no impact, and the weir flow over the Pickpocket Dam was really what was controlling the elevations upstream. We had some early thoughts that potentially crossroad and the backwater that was created would impact the discharge capacity of the dam, but we found that that was really had a negligible impact. So we looked at multiple alternatives to, meet the regulatory discharge requirement. And one of them was this alternative one, which was really just increasing the current abutment height and seeing what elevation, if we raise that abutment height and kept the spillway crest at the same elevation and left that sediment island in place, how high would we need to raise the abutment? And we found that you'd need to raise the abutment approximately 4 feet to be able to pass the 2.5 times the 100-year with 1 foot of freeboard. What's different from the last time I presented this is we've also now included climate change, and with that increased discharge, you'd have to raise the abutment 6.27 feet to pass that with 1 foot of freeboard. With just raising the abutment, we did show that you'd have a slight increase to the 100-year regulatory flood. And since this has a floodway, that would be in non-compliance with FEMA. So we wanted to highlight that. So alternative 1A is essentially removing that sediment island, and it's so you could increase the performance of the spillway. This brought down the required increases to the abutment heights, bringing them to, for the regulatory, 3.3 feet, and for the climate change to 5.8 feet. And found that removing the sediment island would actually decrease the 100-year flood elevation as well, which would then be in compliance with FEMA. So the second alternative that we looked at is, essentially building a second set of abutments behind the existing abutments. So leaving, the dam itself in place, and then building new abutments to a higher height with higher tiebacks. So this allowed for some more discharge capacity and required, to meet the current regulatory discharge, these second abutments to be raised by 3¼ feet, and with climate change, 5.2 feet. And similarly, this alternative 2 left that sediment island in place and showed an increase in the 100-year flood.
A quick question.
Yeah.
In terms of the width,
Yes.
you've got a little road on the north side. Will this affect that road, Pickpocket Lane?
I have a slide in a few that will help you answer that question.
Okay.
So similarly to alternative A, we evaluated removing that sediment island and showed that that step abutment would need to be raised by 2.8 feet to meet regulatory and 4.8 feet to meet the climate change, and showed that similar decrease in the 100-year flood. And then we also looked at dam removal and just took the dam out of the hydraulic model, both the training weir and the dam proper, and showed that we had a fairly significant, about an 8-foot decrease in the 100-year flood at the dam. That tapered as you went further in the impoundment, but at the dam itself was a fairly sizable decrease. So this slide, the black portion is the dam spillway. The gray lines, so I'm looking at, so the black portion is the main spillway. These gray components are the existing abutments, and then these red portions are what we were talking about, where either raising the existing abutments or doing that second step and extending back. And the slide that we're looking at is a raster of elevation, and it's color-coded based on this index, and looking at the elevations we needed to get to be able to have that full tieback, to be able to contain the flow. And we're showing, based on all those different alternatives, that to get to that higher elevation, we need to go back about 140 to 160 feet, depending on the alternative, and then on River Right, 150 feet to 210 feet. Expending on River Right, it would, to get this far, it would definitely extend off of town property and onto private property. And the tiebacks on this side, this is the road I think you're talking about, is right here, Lionel, and we'd be able to avoid impacts to that road. So, to give a status update, as I mentioned previously, we were able to find a window in April to get out and do our bathymetric survey. At that time, we also did sediment probing. So we went out, we took a survey of the first elevation where you hit material, and then we also went out and probed to when we hit refusal. So we brought a steel rod out, would bring it to the, when it first hit bottom, and then we'd push it in manually till we hit refusal to define the depth of soft sediment and the sediment that would likely be mobile. We're in the process of processing all that data. What we found was, in the sediment probing data, is that right around the dam, the soft sediment depths were in like the 3-foot range and tapered not that far from the dam to about a foot, and then tapered down to pretty much hard refusal all the way. So there's actually not that much soft sediment upstream of this dam. So the alternatives development is also underway. I went through some of the preliminary alternatives we evaluated a few years ago. We're now looking to refine those, and we'll also be looking at dam stabilization alternatives. Because you can also, you can look at passing the discharge with 1 foot of freeboard, or you could look at stabilizing it and showing that the dam would be stable passing that discharge. So that'll be one alternative that we'll be looking at. We'll also be looking at dam modification and looking at potentially lowering the spillway or partial removal. Refining the spillway extensions or modifications. So, in the previous analysis, we really looked at just raising the abutments or adding a step abutment. We'll look at other options of increasing the overall spillway length. And then we'll also further refine dam reclassification and looking at the impacts of potentially purchasing properties downstream to lower that. But I will note that, as I mentioned earlier, that even with reclassification, there's still overtopping of the Route 111, which would make this a significant hazard dam. And the dam, as it currently stands, doesn't meet the requirements of a significant hazard dam either.
Excuse me, where would it overtop 111?
Where would it overtop?
Bridge.
I would think at the low spot.
Right.
I don't have that mapping with me today, but
Okay.
we can look at that for you. But it's at the low spot, which is typically right around the bridge or the approach sections to the bridge. And then we've also done the sediment probing, but we've also done sediment sampling. So we developed we looked at, and I'll get into this a little bit more in some future slides, but we developed a sediment sampling plan, submitted that to New Hampshire DES, and then went out and took those samples. Those sample results came back last week, so in some future slides I have some preliminary results to share. And then, as I've already mentioned, we've started to get into updating the hydrology and hydraulic analysis, looking at the design discharges under current standards and under potential climate change. I've talked about that a little already, but I have a few slides that we'll get into as I go along. So as on the sediment sampling plan, so we developed a detailed sediment sampling plan. As part of that plan, we looked at the entire watershed, which is about a 74 square mile watershed, looked at the environmental databases to see what potential contaminants could you expect in the sediments, were there any releases, to help fine tune what parameters we'd be sampling for. And in the bottom right is really the list of contaminants that we were sampling for. We were also doing grain size analysis to look at the size of the sediments and to help with transport potential. Ultimately, we had 5 sediment sampling locations, 3 upstream of the dam and 2 downstream of the dam.
Can you explain the picture on the bottom right?
Yes. So the picture on the bottom right is results from the environmental database. So the black line is the overall watershed. So I mentioned the 74 square miles, and the red dots are essentially anywhere in the site that had above-ground storage tanks, underground storage tanks, remediation sites, waste generators, that type of, so we looked at all of those. You know, predominantly, most of those are closed sites. But that was part of the analysis that we went through as we were developing our sediment sampling plan.
Point where the dam is located?
I will. The dam is located right here where we're labeled site, and that's where the dam is. So, you know, upstream, it's a big watershed, 74 square miles. So, the graphic on this shows where we took samples. So we took, you know, a sample further up in the impoundment, 2 closer in the vicinity of where the, you know, here's the dam, you know, 1 right upstream of the dam, 1 a little further, and then we took a series of samples downstream as well, just downstream of Crossroad and a little further downstream. So this is, as I said, these are preliminary results. My site investigation and remediation team are still going through these and processing the results, but provided me these bullets as preliminary results. So, you know, no concentrations or pesticides or PCBs were detected in the samples. PAHs and metals were detected in all samples, which are pretty typical. Arsenic was the only contaminant found in excess of the remediation standards, but is thought to be background, given the naturally occurring arsenic in the area. And we also preliminary did ecological risk based on the sample results and found those to be, you know, low for the metals and PAHs, moderate in samples both upstream and downstream for arsenic, and moderate for the samples downstream for PAHs, but they weren't in the samples upstream.
Is PAH related to PFAS? Is that what?
No, it's PAHs are,
Can't remember what you called it.
polyaromatic hydrocarbons. They're typically like from cars and road. It's often found in stormwater.
Okay, thank you.
So similarly, here's the watershed of, here's where the Great Dam is. This slide shows the overall watershed. It is a 74 square mile watershed. Under some of our previous work, we developed a rainfall runoff model in the Army Corps' hydrologic modeling system. So we updated that model with current rainfall data and to the newest version of that model, and found that the 100-year discharge at the predicted 100-year discharge at the dam is 3,980, or approximately 4,000 CFS. You know, to meet the current discharge requirements of 250% of the 100-year, it brings the design discharge to 10,000 CFS. We also followed the New Hampshire guidance on evaluating climate change, which essentially has you multiply the precipitation by 15% or 115%. So the current 100-year storm is 8.4 inches in 24 hours. So with 15% increase, that brings you to 9.7 inches in 24 hours. You know, we updated that in our rainfall runoff model, and that predicts a flow of 5,940 CFS for the 100-year storm. And then bring that to the regulatory discharge at 250% of that, you get to just under 15,000 CFS. And though it's only a 15% increase in precip, given the large watershed size, and once you're getting to that depth of rainfall, most of that's all running off and making it to the river. So we're seeing a almost 50% increase in the design flood when you build in climate change. So for next steps, We're going to be finalizing the alternatives and working with Paul on finalizing those. We're also going to be starting our cultural resource studies, looking at a phase 1 archaeological survey, and that's really more of a desktop visual survey. Submitting a project area form to New Hampshire DHR and developing an individual inventory form to evaluate whether the dam would meet National Historic Register components. And then once we finalize the alternatives, we'll begin the impact analysis, looking at rare species, fish passage, wetland impacts, recreational, invasive species, ice, water supplies, water quality, infrastructure, and as part of that, we'll also be developing visual simulations of what those changes could look like. We'll also be doing a dam inspection, looking at, doing a visual dam inspection, looking at the structural stability, and doing a more detailed stability analysis to help with some of those alternative evaluations. So in the end, we end up with a pretty detailed, thick report. I thought it would be helpful. I mean, it's hard to see this slide for sure, but I took a few snips from the feasibility study for the Great Dam, and looking at, the alternatives that were carried through, looking at that we'll be developing cost estimates for the design and construction, and the different components, so that to help assist in the decision on how to move forward. And the draft feasibility study, we've already talked about this, but we'll include all of these components, and we're looking to finalize that by April next year.
April of next year. So at some point, there's going to be a list of alternatives, pros, cons, costs of the different alternatives. At some point, we should be inviting Brentwood to come and see what you found and to think about these things with us. What date do you think that should happen?
Second start on the schedule.
Second start on the schedule. So that's way out next year, I think.
January. October of this year.
January of 2024.
Oh, that one.
So you think that's when we would invite Brentwood, not before that point, right?
Leave that one to you, Paul.
The way that we devised the schedule, and I didn't do this alone, Jake helped.
We worked together on it.
Yeah, it was that finally we'll have a draft report. The draft report is going to be done at the end of the year, and then that star with the number 2 in January 24 was when it's going to be presented. All of those things in the very last slide that Jake was was showing, we'll have that information available at the end of the year, and then a presentation in January. And all of the stuff doesn't end there. There's revisions to the draft report afterwards, and maybe some clarifications, that sort of thing. And but we need to button up the project for the stormwater planning grant by April of 2024.
Okay, so I'm remembering in our experience with the dam removal that we had public meetings where we invited the public and we informed them without taking a position on what should happen. We just informed the public about the alternatives and pros and cons and costs. So you're thinking that would happen in January of 2024?
That's correct. And let me just pause there a minute and go back to the Great Dam time. Yeah. We had a public meeting when we were trying to figure out what to ask our consultant to do. Then we had another public meeting halfway through. What do you know about, what are you figuring out here for the Great Dam project? Give us an update, kind of like what Jake is doing right now. And so there was other steps along the way. And with this project, we have the benefit of already going through a similar project before. So our timeline is condensed considerably from what we figured out, what we needed to be asking, and that's what the scope of this project does. So not as much in front of the public on it, but all the components are there.
Okay, so again, we're thinking of inviting the public way off in January of 2024, because that makes the best sense.
I think that would be our big one, yes.
Okay, thank
But
you.
it seems to me the public is going to be at the meeting you're describing to get more time. You're going to get some idea, not a lot of ideas, but they'll be informed generally about this activity, right? So that'll be the first time the public is going to essentially have a view about this.
So
No.
we're going to hear more about this dam project
Yeah.
before January. I'll be giving periodic updates. And if there's little decision times on how to move forward, or if we're in a little bit of debate amongst ourselves, we'll bring that to the group and get some feedback and stuff. So it's not going to be quiet on the Pickpocket front at all. One of the ideas also that Jay kind of skimmed over a little bit is we have all of those alternatives that we'll be looking at. There will not be detailed analysis in every one of those. What we'll end up doing is pick, I think, 3 of them to do the detailed analysis. Some of them will rise to this is a good idea, and some will sink, that they're not a good idea fairly quickly. But we don't want to waste time on the other ones, so we'll be coming and analyzing at least 3 of them a little deeper.
So we won't be postponing our River Advisory Committee meetings until January of 2024, right?
That's up to you, Mr.
That's mostly up to you, Paul.
Any other questions? I was on the question slide. Any discussion?
Behind you.
Yeah.
You gotta come up.
Hi, Kevin Lucy. Question for Jake. Just the sediment slide, and it seems like you indicated, I just didn't capture where the sediment results were. So just the SED 3 and SED 4, those are the downstream?
Yes. So, actually see the photo, but this is set 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one's 5. So, metals and pHs were found in all of them. Arsenic was in sediment 2, 4, and 5. So 2, 4, 5, and the pHs that reached a moderate level were in sediment 3 and 4 downstream.
Can these slides be provided to our recording secretary?
Absolutely. I can send you a PDF of them.
Yeah, that would be good. Joanna Bartel is our recording secretary. Just
Okay. If Paul has, do you have her contact information, Paul? I can send you the PDF.
You had an extra one right now?
I have a PDF. You can have a hard copy if you want. Right?
Well, I don't.
PDF would probably be better for the
She needs to be
secretary.
able to put it in the report if she wants to.
I also have the actual PowerPoint too on thumb drive if you want that.
So while we have the expert from the Dam Bureau here, several times the topic of can we go back to the original classification of Great Dam. So if there is any questions on what that means right now, we've got the Dam Bureau, Mr. Weber here, to answer any questions. So I just wanted to point that out there. It will make good use of his time if you do have any questions with that.
So good afternoon. Once again, I'm Jim Weber from the DES Dam Bureau, and I'll be happy to try to answer any of your questions about hazard classification. We've already gone over, Jake did, about how we got to where we're at, but obviously maybe some of you have some additional questions. So shoot. Yes.
So having absorbed some of this, one of the notes that I made was what happens if that island just gets taken out?
The island doesn't really have any impact on the hazard classification. The hazard classification is based off what would happen if the dam were to fail. And so the components that are important to that are the amount of water that's stored behind the dam. So the island has a little bit of an impact for the 100-year event, but it doesn't have a major impact. And then the other components that impact the hazard classification are the downstream topography and downstream structures.
So it wouldn't benefit.
If the island were removed, the evaluation would have to be redone, but I don't think it would have any real significant impact on the hazard classification. I doubt it would change it.
I agree.
Thank you. Yes.
Was there any thought given to looking into the history of, for example, the mobile homes that would be affected, and whether they were constructed with permits?
No, that's not something we typically evaluate. We're looking at what's there, not necessarily how it got there. Unfortunately, hazard classifications are based off what's currently existing. So, what used to exist or how it was permitted or not permitted is not evaluated.
Because I believe the area you're talking about has a lot of history.
It very well may, and that would not surprise
It's a
me.
nice floodplain.
They're great places to be riverside until it floods. Any other questions? Yes.
In large measure, what you say, we're with it, we're stuck with it.
Yes. Really, the only way to modify a hazard classification would be to lower the volume of water, which means lowering the normal pond level by lowering the spillway, so that you don't have enough water to cause those high hazard impacts downstream. That could be evaluated engineering-wise. They could modify their models they have to evaluate how much you would have to lower that. But my guess, my professional guess, is that you would end up with such a small amount of impoundment that it wouldn't provide the benefits it does now. My guess is that economically it would cost almost as much, maybe even more, to lower the spillway, because then you're also going to have to lower the fish ladder so that it meets the new pond level. And so that's a significant amount of construction work. And so I don't think that that's very likely to be an alternative that would make any financial sense. You could, as I believe Jake alluded to, potentially buy downstream properties and remove them so they no longer are a hazard or a potential hazard. That could be done to lower the hazard classification.
We're still stuck with the road, 111.
You're still stuck with 111. You're not going to get so the best you're looking for probably is significant hazard. There were also a couple of other houses that Jake did not mention that had significant hazard impacts and not high hazard impacts. It was at least one, if I recall correctly, Jake. Yeah. So, but obviously there's a big difference going from a high hazard to a significant hazard dam in terms of what you might have to accommodate for a flood event. The other third possibility is there is the possibility of modifying the downstream terrain. Let's just talk about the mobile home area, so that maybe you raise that whole little peninsula that has most of those mobile homes on it by 3 feet or whatever else and got them out of the flood area. Obviously, that's not going to be cheap either, because you're still going to have to move all those, whatever utilities are involved, things like that. You could potentially build a levee or a flood wall to protect them as well, as long as that ended up being less than 6 feet in height. If it's greater than 6 feet in height, it becomes a new jurisdictional dam, which would be high hazard in and of itself, and that's not solving your problem, it's just moving it downstream. So, did that kind of make sense for everybody? Yeah. Any follow-up questions? Okay, so basically, Lionel's correct, you're stuck with it.
Thank you.
All right, if you do have any further questions, please contact me. Paul has my email and everything else, so, all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, then
So the next time we see you is when you're up here before the select board, right?
No, I was talking about the special meeting was for the Squamscott River Siphon Project.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not this.
No, not here, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional things to say about the Exeter Reservoir issue, or is that included in this or separate from this?
The Exeter Reservoir analysis is separate. And just so happens the gentleman that you were just talking to just approved that contract in scope just a day or so ago. And so the town will be putting together some signatures for a contract with VHB to figure out how to increase the discharge capacity of that reservoir also. And the schedule of that would look a little, quite a bit similar to the one that you're looking at for this one. However, you might have to add 3 or 4 months to the end of it there. So it's not going to be a quick project, and it's going to probably, I don't know, June or so of next year be finished. All right. Yeah. Okay, so there is one project that we'll probably like to talk to you about in the upcoming months, and that would be part of our 319 grant that we had for either our adaptive management for nitrogen in the bay or even our MS4 requirements, and that's on the fertilizer reduction efforts. And there was a pretty nice pamphlet that was just devised, and there's also some little signs for people to put out in their yard and that sort of thing too. But we'll see if we can get Kristen Murphy. She played a pretty big role in devising that program with our consultant also. So that could be at a future meeting update also.
As in June 15th?
If you so choose to have one at that time.
Or yes. July 20th? Or August 17th? Those are the Thursdays. Thursdays of the month.
I'm thinking a little bit of strategy here. We could use this this group here to potentially give some information on the siphon project, if you think that's appropriate, before the deliberative session.
Yeah, we're hearing, well, I asked before, and we got dates like June 26th and July 11th and August 15th for the process of going for a special, a special town meeting for special funding.
So it's up to you when you want to have it.
Well, June 15th, would we know any more? Is that right?
We could know whether the court has allowed us to proceed, but that would be the only thing we'd know at that point.
Okay, does that sound like June 15th is our next meeting? Or do we want to, I'm seeing in favor of a June 15th meeting? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, wait a minute, we have any other business? Seeing.
I think we're going to carry this guy out on our shoulders.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that means.
We will not throw you out a window. We'll take you down the elevator, and then you'll have to walk out the stairs.
There's a big card out there. We're going to have a big surprise.
Okay, I'm also supposed to ask about public comment. Do we have any public for comment? I think we're okay there. Okay, now we have to move to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
So Lionel moved and Terry seconded. So I guess we're going to vote on adjourning the meeting. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Okay, I think that was unanimous. Thank you very much.
Okay. So that gives you the answer to when we want.
for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive